Hello, everybody. Fernando Labastida once again in another episode of Lin Talks Tech, here with Linh Nguyen, the CEO and co-founder of IT-Conductor. How are things going over there in Cupertino today, Lin?
Thriving, keeping busy, doing interesting things, always moving forward.
That's perfect. Always moving forward. Always be moving forward. That's perfect. So I really wanted to get some information from you. If you could talk about this upcoming webinar that you're holding, 8 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Pacific time on April the 30th. It's called Change Automation Intelligence for IT Operations. That's the name of the webinar. Change Automation Intelligence for IT Operations. Tell us a little bit about what this webinar is all about and what can attendees gain from joining this webinar.
Yeah, so a little while ago, we launched IT-Conductor CHAI, which is Change Automation Intelligence, stands for. Or it can stand for your favorite cup of chai tea too, both. But we launched that and we had our first webinar last month in March. That topic was specifically talking about change automation intelligence for automating SAP changes. Transport, which is the mechanism to promote code throughout the development QA production landscape in SAP. So that was a pretty positive launch, and we had a webinar. Then you can also see the past recording. This one, the follow-up series, is talking about change automation for general IT enterprise type of change. So in IT, there's essentially multiple types of change. It could be something that's like a code promotion, right? So developers needing to get code QA and move to production as part of the promotion. It could be a configuration change where, you just need to apply some parameters to an environment that needs to be in a controlled manner, tested and deployed after approval. So configuration is another type of change. The other type of change we see happen fairly frequently is the patching. All right. So anytime when you have an enterprise environment, you've got vulnerability, security, and the team saying, hey, you got to patch your application. Obviously, there's testing to patch it and then to roll those patches out. We don't want to be in a situation where patching untested thing, unapproved, without a backup plan and doing it manually, error prone. All of these things that need to be automated. Everybody knows what happened with the whole CrowdStrike thing, with the whole Friday patching and bringing down, massive international infrastructure. Yeah. So patching is the third type of things that we see quite often that requires a change management. They don't just happen. They need to have a change tracking. Somebody's assigned to do the work. Somebody has to actually deploy the change, and then it's auditable in some sense that the reporter of that change will have to provide audit to either internal or external auditors at some point, like, hey, you did this. Where was all the paper trail and all of the logs on how it was done and how it was tested and etc. Right? So that's the third type of change. And then you have the other types of change that involve IT service requests. So IT organizations always deploying new application, deploying new cloud infrastructure or IT assets like servers and applications. These things happen on a day-to-day basis where, maybe a business service manager wants an additional set of servers to accommodate for peak load for something like that. The IT service team has to take that request, turn it into a change, and then have some kind of deployment to make sure that these systems and applications get deployed according to the request. So this fourth type of change also happen very frequently, and we see that it needs to be tracked, right? Like, for instance, if you order a bunch of servers and then something else shows up, that's not what you specified, there's a fail in the process. It has to be reviewed, approved. So in the IT world, there's typically a constant circle or cycle of change requests, change approval, a review, testing of that change in some form or fashion, and then approval for final deployment. And so this process, you might hear the term CAP, change board, change approval board. They normally have a meeting every week and they approve what changes go into what environment. Well, we want to talk about managing this change end to end process, not a separate service request, not a
Hmm.
separate set of people tracking it on a spreadsheet, doing something manually, and then eventually going somewhere doing something else. And then the approval has to tie all of this in as a one to end. We see that this process today is fairly kind of siloed.
Right.
Where IT conducted chai comes in is that we can have a request, have a tracking, have ability to deploy that change in some environment to test it, prove that it works, have logs to show that it works, and then have some kind of approval. Maybe a change board can approve it, and then have that approval, maybe with a time to deploy. Let's say a date and time, Friday, 5 p.m., whatever it is, have that automatically go into the environment. And then, so you can manage this change end to end, provide accountability, but also be able to do it more efficiently. So
Right.
we know a lot of people don't patch security because it's hard, it's not automated, and it's kind of fragmented. Maybe transferred responsibility between multiple teams. But if this can be tracked as one end to end, maybe there are multiple roles and responsibility, but the change can be managed as one end to end process with handoff. And
Hmm.
so this concept of change automation intelligence, we talk about tracking this, not just requesting it, but also deploying that automatically, right?
Hmm. Now, is this particularly important nowadays? I mean, I'm just wondering if there's any trends right now in terms of there there being more change requests going on in the enterprise and in the IT department at the enterprise than previously.
Um, well, I think previously, like I said, there's lots of products out there. You got Jira, ServiceNow. All these guys create change of many things in the organization. It's well embedded in enterprise. Unfortunately, like as I said, there's a lot of things that are just raised on paper. I could easily send an email asking for a change,
Hmm.
in the old-fashioned way of not having a ticket, right?
Right.
Um, but what happens is that if 80% of these changes involve something that should be done automatically. I had a customer for about 5 years. I was helping them with the SAP cloud migration. It's a Fortune 50 company, but they made the conscious decision at the beginning of this cloud transformation project to adopt agile and to adopt a process driven approach to automate. And what that means is that they said nothing will get deployed to production without automation. Now think about that, right? That's a major step. Think
Yeah.
about companies that's been around 50, 100 years. Um, when they adopt a digital transformation, they need to kind of embrace the concept that to get to that point, maybe the North Star 5, 10 years from now, I need to start adopting change and I need to start adopting the automation. I cannot change and not adopt automation because these change will cause more problem if it's not automated. Think about the amount of things that needs to happen to be deployed to be successful in one of these projects. And we're talking about maybe 20, $30 million project, right?
Wow.
There's
Yeah.
many things that could go wrong. But from the day that management accept across the organization, IT organization, to say, we will not deploy anything without automation. The difference is that I see this because I was brought in as an advisor very early on.
Right.
Um, to see that they adopt this makes a huge difference because the pace of this deployment is increased with automation.
Hmm.
Deploying 100 systems is much different than deploying one or two.
Yeah.
And to get the scale, you need automation and also to have consistency, to have the trackability, and that you don't even have the people to even do these change manually. If you employ a project that have 300, 400 people, from
Hmm.
not just internal, but you have third-party vendors, managed service providers, system integrators, software vendor, cloud vendors. All these people involved, the customer has to be in charge of the change. They
Hmm.
ultimately own it because the business wants them to be responsible for their success. And so when management decide to do automation, it's not because they just think it's a cool concept.
Yeah.
It's because it makes a big difference. and to automate changes in every fashion, as I mentioned before, like good configuration change, deploying cloud infrastructure, doing patching, doing anything that related to even code promotion. All of this had to go through automation. They could not
Mhm.
deploy manually, right? There's always exceptions. People say, yeah, no, you can't do 100%. But
Yeah.
the goal is a North Star.
Mhm.
If you get 80% of that, think of the difference that makes between that and doing maybe 80% manual.
Right.
There's huge difference. Your project slip and you're getting all kinds of problems, inconsistency in deploying systems and applications. Um, so this is why the concept of change automation intelligence is important because it is a new thinking, right? It's
Mhm.
like not just doing it on paper because all these companies already have these service desk tickets and change management like ServiceNow or Jira or
Yeah.
whatever, right? It's
Mhm.
they're not don't have a lack of tool, but
Right.
to make it congruent, you have to join the request all the way, not just drop it halfway, all the way from concept, design, testing, QA, final deployment, all through the process in an automated fashion. That's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's the way why we think about automation is it's not doing a task, it's an orchestration from end to end, from the
Right.
time it's requested, from the time that the person who requested gets to check out if something this is right or not, and say yes, I can move this along. That tracks along the route and moves to QA for testing and validation, and eventually automatically deployment into the final destination.
Yeah. So, who is this webinar for? Who should attend this webinar?
Oh, these are really for change manager, for service manager, so IT teams, operation team, those who we talk about automation in general that has
Yeah.
responsibility for deploying anything like any IT organization who's responsible for deploying code, who's responsible for deploying customization and configuration, who's
Mhm.
doing patching, right?
Right.
Who's doing infrastructure as a service type deployment. So infrastructure as code means like cloud. You go to Amazon, you go to Google, you go to Microsoft Azure, whatever, and you say I need a XYZ server database, right? It happens. You can do it manually or you can do it automatically,
Mhm.
right? So there's guys that are cloud infrastructure guys who need to have this stuff because
Right.
it's not enough just to request, but requests have to come in some fashion. It's like when I ask you something, you can type out a static email or you can fill out a form. Why do we have forms? Form is a way of automating the
Yeah.
capturing of information so
Mhm.
that form can feed into something else, right? A
Right.
process.
Right.
So this is the same thinking that we did. Why don't you design this whole thing, capture the information, right? What is the change? Who needs to approve it? What's the workflow?
Mhm.
And then you're getting that all approved and then deployed into final destination using an automation.
Yeah. It sounds like as though with the webinar, people are not just going to learn about, IT Conductor Chai
Uh-huh.
and about how you talk about automation, change automation,
Uh-huh.
and they're not just going to learn about the need, why automate change, but I think it sounds to me, Lynn, as though they're also going to experience kind of a mind shift change, kind of like a shift in the way they approach
Uh-huh.
or they think about change management. Is that kind of the goal with the webinar?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think more than anything, we just want to use a solution to show the concept. Whether you
Mhm.
adopt it and whether you have something that can do similar, the same thing goes that change starts. I mean, you could say people like, hey, I'm opposed to change. Why? Because they fear the process.
Right.
But if you see the process and makes sense to you, there are steps, there are clear things that happen. And
Hmm.
why is there difference in doing this as an orchestration versus, a little bit here, a little bit there, handing it off here? Everybody knows the game of waiting, right? In an organization, the bigger they are, you do something, you send an email to somebody, you wait for them, you open a ticket, you wait for them. So there's this constant wait. And that's why if you're thinking about like, I need to deploy 100 patches that
Hmm.
touches, 5 applications. the waiting itself is more than the work,
Right.
right?
Right.
If you were to streamline that, you would put it into a workflow, and the workflow would notify whoever's next in the chain, and they'll take care of it, as opposed to something manual that somebody just typing in an email and waiting for somebody to respond, right? That
Yeah.
could be like, hey, if I get on the phone with a approve and I click approve, it automatically continues the workflow. These type of things are not like uh, mind blowing kind of like rocket ship stuff, but it is important that process is rarely about technology.
Yeah.
Process, it takes something as a best practice and
Mhm.
encapsulate it into something that's an orchestration of that process,
Right.
right? Because we all know what process. You can write a little paper, you can put a spreadsheet, you can, draw a diagram. That's all process. To
Right.
get that into action is a big difference. So um, if you don't adopt automation platform, you're going to end up with this manual process of a process that you have, right? But
Yeah.
and if you take that and say, now I digitize that, uh, how can I put it into a workflow? How can I put it into, like I say, a standard form request that actually does something, right? Not just submit it and then waiting for somebody. We all know about submitting a ticket and just waiting for somebody at the other end to look at it and try to understand it and, have a turnaround. So this is constantly wasting time and energy. That's not efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's great. So again, the webinar is going to be on April the 30th. That is
Uh-huh.
going to be a Wednesday, April the 30th, from 8
Uh-huh.
to 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, 10 to 10:30 Central, 11 to 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. And you could go and sign up for this at itconductor.com.
Events link there too. If you go to the main website.
Yeah, if you go to itconductor.com, yes, you can go to news and events, and in the drop down there is events, and you'll see the cloud. The yeah,
the webinar
actually,
should be there.
yeah.